The talk you're about to hear was given by Gry Bossen, the Policy and Campaign Coordinator and Volunteer Coordinator at Forests of the World, or in Danish, Verdens Skove. At one point in this talk, Gry talks about Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil. His name isn't mentioned since his name was on the presentation slides, so for those of you listening to this podcast, this occurs around 23 minutes in.
I am a policy coordinator, campaign coordinator, and a volunteer coordinator in Forests of the World. I've been working on our soy campaigns for the last 3-4 years, so that's why I am now a claimed expert. Just somebody who knows a little bit about soy, and especially the repercussions it has for the forests. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about the soy and the dark side of the soy, and also the things that are going on in the EU, for instance, or globally to prevent this a little bit. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how to help this problem, or what you can do, or I don't know. Let's see. Yeah. So the soy production globally has been rising the last many years, the last 20 years at least. And this is mainly due to our consumption of meat worldwide. It might also have a little bit to do with the consumption of bioenergy. And we use the soy oil for biodiesel, biofuels. It corresponds with a total area of 123 million hectares. That's a lot. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how much it is in the Danish consumption, how much big an area that is. I don't even know how to picture this. Yeah, most of the soy comes out of Brazil and the US. We get most of our soy from Brazil and Argentina. It's actually used for a lot of things, like cooking oil also. Like the oil is used in many food products. But the cake, we call it in Danish, the soy cake, when the soybean is pressed, you get a cake out of it, and that is mostly used for animal consumption. 75% of all soy production is used for animal consumption, for animal fodder or feed or whatever you call it. So that's why we also say it's one of the main drivers, is our meat production. Yeah. This is just so it's actually a very small part that's used for the biofuel. That's because it's only part of the oil that goes for the biofuel. But when you have a soybean, like 80% is pressed into the cake, and 20% or 18% is the oil. So you produce a lot more soy meal. Soy meal is called soy meals. Then you produce oil. The geographical footprint of the soy is where we see the biggest problem, right? So this is where all the deforestation happens. The footprint is the area it takes up on Earth, on the planet, and that means a lot of deforestation for the production of soy. Most of the deforestation happens in South America. Maybe I should start by saying that Forests of the World is an environmental NGO who works to protect the forests all over the world-ish. We have projects in South America, in 1 country in South America, and 3 countries in Latin America, Middle America, and then 2 countries in Africa. We work on the ground with locally based, rights-based projects, where we work with local people, local partners, to implement forest protection, like implementing an alternative income instead of cutting down the forests, and setting up like cooperatives, so that the productions of cocoa or coffee, or actually also timber, will be sustainable, so you don't have to cut down excessive forest or more forest to make your own income to sustain your livelihoods. But we also work on the bigger drivers for deforestation. So one of the drivers is obviously soy. There's also a lot of other drivers, but we don't work specifically with palm oil yet. We are a fairly small NGO. We are like 20 people. And most of the people are dedicated to making the projects. And then some of us are making also advocacy and lobby. And this is where we confront or deal with the drivers. So we try to work at a political level to make restrictions or change the laws so that the soy won't be the same problem, so that you will actually address this deforestation caused by soy and other drivers of deforestation. That's why we're interested in soy. Soy is also a problem in Bolivia, where we have projects on the ground, so we see some of the consequences with our own eyes. Not me, but my colleagues who are out there sees them with their own eyes. But most of the soy comes out of Argentina and Brazil, and it's difficult to say how much soy we get from, for instance, Bolivia, because it goes through Brazil. So you can't really know where your soy is from. Yeah?
Can I ask why the soy from Bolivia goes through Brazil?
I think it's closer to the ocean, because it's transported in big ships.
Okay. So then it's like technically from Brazil, but...
Most probably, yes. I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen any overview where the soy is indicated to be from Bolivia.
Mm.
But maybe the Bolivian soy is used either in Bolivia itself or in Brazil. It's very difficult to trace the soy. But it doesn't seem like any soy is going out of Bolivia.
Oh, also considering that 8.2 million hectares were deforested, so then taking into account that 123 or something hectares are used for soy production, then was that converted farmland from something else? Was something else being grown there before?
A lot of it is in the States as well, where it hasn't been deforested. There wasn't any, at least not rainforest there before. I'm not sure what was there. I don't really know about the situation in China, for instance. China are also producing soy.
Yeah.
There were some areas, probably, this is only from 2000 to 2015, so some areas have been deforested already before that. And then there will be some of the statistics that are a little bit difficult to see through, because sometimes they send in the cattle. They actually deforest, and then they put cattle on the ground first for a couple of years, and then they plant the soy. And that means that sometimes you can't see in the statistics what's the cause, if it's soy that's the cause of the expansion or the deforestation. So right now in the Amazon, for instance, there is a soy moratorium signed in Brazil that prohibits the destruction of the Amazon for more soy production, which means that the soy has been sent to the Cerrado, or the what do you call it? The forest, the Cerrado. But it also means that what is causing the deforestation is the cattle in the Amazon. And I don't know if you remember in 2019, there was a huge amount of forest fires in Brazil, or at least we heard about it. So in 2020, it was worse. 2021, it was even worse. 2022 is shaping up to be even worse still. So they are still destroying the Amazon. It's just cattle that they're putting on the land. And it might turn into soy eventually, but this is some of the things we're trying to prevent. Yeah. It's the big cattle ranges in Brazil. I think you'd call it industrial, yeah. It's produced for both the leather and the meat. Yeah. The cattle production in Brazil is very different than in Denmark. They actually go outside, where in Denmark they stay inside. We don't see them, yeah. So a little bit about the soy trade, just to give you an overview. The soy trade in the world is as I said, very difficult to trace, because there are no laws yet to demand you to be able to account for where your soy is from. So unless you dig down into the shipping papers and pay a lot of money to get to have access to them, it's impossible to know how the soy is traded. Particularly, there are some big lines that you can actually see how much is coming from Brazil to Denmark, but it's difficult to see where in Brazil it's from, and it's difficult to see if it's actually from Brazil or maybe Bolivia or something like that. So China is one of the biggest importers, even though they produce soy themselves as well. But EU is the second largest importer of soy in the world. 10% doesn't seem like a lot, but as the second largest, it's not because China is importing 90%. Maybe they're importing, I actually don't know, 20%, something like that. But it seems like the European import is causing more deforestation than the Chinese import. And this might be because we are importing more soy from Latin America, and China might be importing it from the States, for instance. I'm not sure where China gets their soy from. I haven't looked into that yet. Let me just fix Denmark, then I'll take on China afterwards. Yeah. So Denmark, we import 1.7 million tons soy a year-ish. It varies a little bit from year to year. It's about 10% of Europe's total import. That's quite a lot for a small country, yeah.
That's crazy.
That's all our kind little pigs who needs soy. Because the soy we import is linked to deforestation, this is causing a lot of CO2 emissions as well. And this is one of the big problems with the import of soy. Right now, it seems, I think it's around 6 million tons that are caused by just the soy, and then the last 1 million tons is from the palm oil. So this means that half of what our agricultural sector or business is now emitting, the same amount we're emitting outside the country, we're just not counting it. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the problems with soy. I'll come back to it a little bit, but I also want to give it the benefits that are actually part of the soy story. The soybean is a very efficient little crop, a little bean with a lot of protein, and it's got all the right acids, amino acids and stuff like that to be consumed, for instance, by animals. The protein is available in the soybean, and it's very effective. You can grow a lot of protein on a small area compared to other crops and other beans as well. I was once told that the soy has been genetically modified so that it's easier to grow it in Latin America. It was actually more suited for the European environment. And I lack the scientific source for this, so this is why I say I was told. I'm not sure by who, but I think it's true.
Most of soy is, especially coming from the US.
Yeah, it's genetically modified, yeah. But US is more temperate, you know, the climate is different than it is in the jungle. But one of the reasons it's also genetically modified is so that it can resist the glyphosate that you spray it or spray it with, you know what I mean.
Yes, do you know if it's really genetically modified or did they breed them? Because if you breed them a lot in Latin America, then they can naturally become more adapted to it. But was it an active process or not?
I think it was an active process. I think it is actually GMO soy. You call it GMO soy. It's true that it's also part of the scam of genetically modification that you have to use the right agrotoxics, but it's also something you do so it can stand the agrotoxics so that you can get away with the weeds, get rid of the weeds. Yeah.
And second question, do you know if soy can be grown not as a monoculture? Because the other day someone attacked me like, oh, your soy is a monoculture and everything, and I couldn't answer.
All the fact is that you can have different way that is not monoculture. The problem is like you can make a lot of money.
If you do like this.
So, but it's, in Argentina we have a really big problem with the soy monoculture.
Yeah.
So.
In an agroforestry setting, maybe? I don't know, so I'm going to ask you. It sounds good. This was actually trying to highlight the good things about soy, because there are some good things about it as well, but there are definitely also some problems. It's not the soybean per se, it's the production. That is the problem. It's often, especially in Argentina and Brazil, large-scale productions, so it's huge, like farms, like really huge farms. One farmer owns the huge setting of land, and they kick out the local people, or even if they actually leave the local people in the area, they kind of contaminate them with all the glyphosate that they spray on the soy. They sometimes use airplanes. And we have a report from Argentina, actually, where there's a lot of incidences of local people being, like the planes fly over them, and they get sprayed, and their animals die. There is a rise in the number of cancer incidents and unprovoked abortions within the people who's been living close to the soy production areas. This is partly also because they fly over them with this, and the water gets contaminated. Like when they live close to a river, the water gets contaminated, they get contaminated, or the animals get contaminated. It's horrible. Yeah, and as you said, over time, all the nutrients will disappear from the soil, and sometimes they need to cut down more forests to get more nutritious soil to expand their business in. And then deforestation. Deforestation. From our view, it's one of the big problems as well. That huge areas will be deforested. So this is a little overview of the deforestation in South America, where 61% of the deforestation in South America occurs in Brazil, and 48% is in the Amazon. I am actually lacking the year of this, so I don't know when this is from, but I suspect that it's relatively new, but it might be after the soy moratorium. So they have calculated that even though it's animals or cattle that they put on the ground first, they blame the soy for being the reason for the deforestation. As I said, the big reason we import so much soy is our pig production, and this is the reason why the meat production is a problem. It's because they get so much fodder, food, whatever it's called. All of this is not soy. So it's not only to blame soy, but soy is one of the components in the fodder that causes deforestation. Even though it's just such a small part, it's a huge driver of deforestation. A lot of the other things that are in the fodder is grown either in Denmark or in Europe or in Ukraine, where you get the hvede.
Wheat.
Is it called wheat?
Corn? Like, is corn also part of the pig feeds?
Yeah, because they are actually not built to take in too much protein, so you need to put carbohydrates in as well.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to mix it. But then there's, I don't know if you know the term ILUC, indirect land use change. So you grow the wheat in Denmark, and then you might push out the productions of the beans that might be grown in Denmark as well. And then you push it all the way out. Like it needs to be grown somewhere else.
Yeah.
So even though we grow all our own wheat, maybe for the pigs, we still need to import the protein then. So that's why it is pushing the problem out into the forest. So obviously the consequences of all this deforestation, the loss of nature, is the loss of biodiversity, the destructions of renewable resources or just resources overall. Eventually it's climate change, because when you cut down forest you let out a lot of carbon to the atmosphere. It's the destruction of native homes, as I said before. We have a report from Argentina where we have very specific stories from locations in Argentina where people have been displaced, been beaten, been attacked, been shot, have been forced to move, or if they stay, they get hit by the glyphosate or other problems. All right, so to change this big, huge problem, we need to do different things. In our objective, in our minds, we need, first of all, things that we need to reduce the production of meat and eat some of the beans ourselves, and then we also need to change the way it's produced. Why is this so freaking difficult? It's obvious to all of us that this needs to be done. So some of the stuff that has been done so far is, for instance, the soy moratorium that I just told you about briefly, which is a moratorium that they agreed on in Brazil. It was the soy business themselves, and WWF who pushed for this for a long time, and then they decided to make this moratorium where they would not allow deforestation after 2006. So you're not supposed to deforest after 2006 in the Brazil, in the Amazon. You need to move it outside, and a lot of companies signed the moratorium and they kind of live by it, ish. That just pushed the deforestation out into the Cerrado. Other things that are actually in place are certifications, different certifications of the soy. So it's a scheme you try to adhere to, like it's a list of criteria that you adhere to and say, if I fulfill all of these criteria, I can get my soy certified. And so there's like the Proterra, and there's the RTRS, the Roundtable on Sustainable on
Responsible soy.
Thank you. Yes, was the wrong yes. Yes, two different certifications that has been in place for a very long time, and that are being used a lot, but they are not perfect in any way. They are maybe better than nothing, but you cannot lean against these certifications. And in our objective, they don't give you the right to say that your soy is deforestation free. And this is because in the Proterra, which is actually the biggest one, Brazil is producing a lot of this, or most of the Proterra soy worldwide. This is because it has an unclear definition of what native nature is. And when you have an unclear definition of what native nature is, when do you know when that is being cut down? Or how do you know what not to cut down in order to adhere to this? And then the governance of the whole certification scheme is not that good. It's not very transparent. And the wordings on, for instance, human rights, which we think is very important, aka what happened in Argentina, the language being used is not very strong. It doesn't mention that you should not violate indigenous people's rights, or it's more like you should adhere to the ILO 169, which is also good, but it would be stronger to have direct language in the text for this. The RTRS, which is actually somehow the more known one, at least in Denmark, is also not perfect. It's good, but it's not perfect. The worst part about it is that it gives you the possibility to buy credits, which means that you can have a farmer. In theory, it's good, because you can have a farmer way outside the reach of the law or something like that, and he can produce sustainable soy, but he might not have access to the value chain. Like, he can't sell it because the truck coming to pick up his soy is not loaded with sustainable soy, so his soy goes into the regular soy. So he might not have access to that market in that way. But he can then sell a credit. He can then get some extra money. He can sell his soy as conventional, normal soy, and then he can sell a credit for it because it was sustainable. So that means that the Danish soy importers can buy the credits. They can buy conventional soy and buy the credits. This means that they are actually generating a little bit of money for the person who is growing the soy sustainably, which is good. But it doesn't mean that the soy you're holding in your hands is deforestation free, which means that you still give a market away for the deforestation soy. And this is unfortunately what all the Danish companies are doing right now. They are going into the credit business and buying all these credits, and it's just RTRS also gives way for something called mass balance. That means you can buy a bunch of soy and say this is 50% deforestation free. And so what? What about the rest of the? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Teeny, yeah. Don't even want to mention his name. He's just not nice, and he's not being very polite to nature. He is right now trying to dismantle some of the environmental laws in Brazil. Some of the laws that has been put in place for many, many years to protect indigenous people's rights. Some of the environmental institutions that are in place or were in place in Brazil, he's like firing people, cutting down on staff. So the people who were supposed to implement the environmental law in Brazil are no longer there, or are just paralyzed because their bosses have been fired, so they don't know what to do. And so you can actually see the rate of tickets given for illegal deforestation going down, and illegal deforestation going up in Brazil right now, or the last 2-3 years. And this is one of the reasons why the forest fires in Brazil are just growing. He's using the old rhetorics, like cut down the forest and develop our country. This is something that they used in the 85 when they had the military dictatorship, yes. So he's bringing that back. Wonderful. And why is he so important right now? Obviously, he's there right now, and he's actually up for election again now in November-ish. There are some rumors saying that because he doesn't think he's going to be re-elected, or nobody thinks he's going to be re-elected, he's trying to do as much as he can before being re-elected. Because otherwise, going into election year, you might want to slow down the controversial change making, but he's not. He's still trying to push these like dismantling of the laws through. So he's trying to have what we call the destruction package, which is a package of laws, different laws that will take down the rights of indigenous peoples and take away their rights to the land that they've been given the rights to for years and years and years. He's trying to implement new laws that will take away their rights and open up the land for mining and for deforestation. And one of the reasons he's relevant to us also, obviously, the destruction he's causing, but it's also the Mercosur trade agreement that is being discussed. I'm going to say right now, but it's actually laying low right now, but it has been developed for 20 years. It started out in 2002, I think. They started developing the Mercosur trade agreement, and they've been negotiating on it for years and years and years, 20 years. And it's now almost ready. It's in the EU. It's been almost ready for 2 years now, I think. When we first started working on it, it's 1.5 years ago maybe. And it's hopelessly outdated. So when you start something 20 years ago and you have a mandate to negotiate a trade agreement, the mandate is 20 years old. You didn't have the same focus on climate and environment 20 years ago as you do today. So the trade agreement is just not living up to the time right now. If this trade agreement, as it is now, is going to be signed and implemented, it's going to cause a lot of deforestation. There's been some universities that have been calculating this, and only the deforestation caused by beef, for instance, will rise with 25%. So this is going to give way for a lot of deforestation because it will allow agricultural groceries to go to Europe and cars, they call it cars for cows, cars and technology to go to Brazil. There's also some reports saying that this trade agreement will actually hold Brazil back from developing because you're going to keep it in an agricultural country. There's not going to be any need for technological development in Brazil because they're going to import that because of the trade agreement. This means that there won't be the development of this kind of knowledge in Brazil, which will keep them in this. And it's actually both Brazil and Argentina as well as part of this Mercosur trade union. And we have been arguing that you shouldn't finish the trade agreement now because it will be a prize for Bolsonaro. It will be something that he can say, "This is what I've done. I'm so good. I've done this." And we're like, "Yeah, it's been in the making for 20 years. It isn't really your fault, but it will still be on his crown, and that's not something we want to give him or acknowledge him right now." And we don't think that you can make an agreement with a country that is going that direction that he is. It actually does say in the Mercosur agreement that you should live up to the Paris Agreement, whatever that means. The jury is still out on that. But I think it's very safe to say that he is not doing that. He is not stopping deforestation. He is not even living up to his Paris Agreement, the first NDC or the promises that they made, what he should be doing in order to live up to the 1.5 degrees. Another thing that's going on right now, which might be more interesting, is the EU's anti-deforestation law. We don't know really what to, we've been struggling. We called it the EU deforestation law, and it sounded like it was a law to do deforestation. We're like, no, that's not good. So this is a very long name, and now it's actually called the EUDR, the EU Deforestation Regulation. This is supposed to be a regulation that will prohibit the import or export of groceries or products to and from Europe that contains deforestation. This would be huge if they actually succeed in implementing this or making it. They are developing the law right now, and of course there are some flaws and some loopholes in it already. We are fighting hard to close those loopholes so that this will actually be a good law that will have good repercussions. This is something that the business in Denmark is also keen on getting, because a lot of the businesses in Denmark, like the Arla or Coop, for instance, they really want deforestation-free groceries or products. But if they have to step up and do it for themselves, it will be expensive and they will be put out of the market. So they are looking forward to everybody having to live up to this, so that they can take that step and not be out-conquered by the other producers. Yeah, one of the problems is that if it only protects forests, even though it's a deforestation law, we would actually like it to be a conversion-free law. So that's conversion of all ecosystems, not only forests. We don't want it to move to the Pantanal or the Cerrado or other places. Oh, that's it? So that's how we're going to save the world, yeah. It's in the Amazon, the forests don't catch fire on themselves. You need to, it's rainforest, so you need to cut it down, leave it to dry for 2 weeks before it can actually burn. And then you need to light it on fire. So all the forest fires that we are seeing is actually a symptom of something that has happened already. So it's not the fires, but it's very difficult for the fire to spread into the rainforest. But what is also going on is actually because of the climate change, the forest is getting drier and drier, and it's getting more and more difficult for the forest to regenerate, not the destructed forest, but the lush forest. As it is getting drier, that's normal for the forest to get drier in the dry season and then wetter again in the wet season, but it doesn't regenerate in the same way. It doesn't get as wet as it used to. So even there you have this issue where the forest is getting more and more close to being able to catch fire. And then when you light a fire in an area, the forest next to it dries out because it's so hot because of the fire, obviously. And it's actually, then it might be possible for the forest fires to spread a little bit. But in Bolivia, the forest fires can catch on. It's not the same kind of humidity forest where we work in Chiquitania. So it's more like it's more a dry forest where it can actually catch the fires, so the fires can spread wild.
And you say you do advocacy work, right? Can you explain a little bit how you do it?
We actually do it on a lot of different levels. The policy or the advocacy that we do, we have been doing a campaign for a couple of years towards Danish Crown. We've been talking to them directly, having conversations with them on what we think they should do. I'm not an expert in growing soy, so I can't tell them specifically how to do it, but I can tell them that traceability is step one. You need to know where your soy is coming from. You need to know where exactly it's coming from. Then you need to know what's going on out there. Then you need to make sure that there's no deforestation being made in the area or even at the producer level. Because it's not only the soy you buy, because then you could buy it from a farmer who would be doing good soy there and deforestation with the other hand. We don't want that. You need to make sure that the producer that you buy it from is deforestation free in all of his production. And even the importer, the ship who's selling the soy, the Bunge, Cargill, the big companies, should be deforestation free in all of their value chain, is our opinion. But we talked to Danish Crown about that. Then we tried to talk to the Danish government on what regulations can we put in place. They actually did make a soy action plan. The government made it because they also knew that this EUDR, the EU law, was coming. So they knew that they could as well start it. But the action plan is kind of very weak, saying there will be something on an EU level and we will live up to that. And then there has been like an initiative made by the companies themselves, which is called the soy, not soy moratorium, but the Sustainable Soy group network-ish. That's also where Danish Crown is actually also a part of. So they all obliged to make an action plan for themselves, for all of their companies. And they did make action plans, but there was no demand on when to implement the action plans. So it could be in, 22,000-ish. So we've been trying to, when they publish their action plans, we've been trying to read them and make conversation with them and push them in their heads. And saying that they should do it better. And then we've been obviously working with the EU deforestation law. And also when we participate in the international climate negotiations, we can't stop the deforestation from soy, but we can take some of the knowledgement that we have from there, some of the experience that we have from there, and implement it or use it in the development of the Paris rulebook, the rules that are put in place to implement the Paris Agreement. Try to make them stronger on the deforestation area, and just look out for where we can put our foot down and stop the deforestation. It's probably not at the Paris Agreement level, but it's very much on the EU level, both the deforestation law here, the regulation, or some of the other regulations that are being developed right now in the EU, which is a lot. We're just a small NGO with like one person trying to follow all of EU, and they got like 50 different laws coming out right now, so you're like,
it's such easy text to read, right?
Yes, it's just easy reading. But we work together with other NGOs as well. So all of the Danish NGOs, and we have a big network of European NGOs as well, where we try to get our intel and try to say, this is our experience, what can you do, what can we do? So we're actually quite coordinated in making statements and trying to just implement or improve the stuff that they're doing. We do different things in different countries depending on what's the problem there. But in Honduras, we work with the local people and the indigenous peoples through their own organizations, and we've been working with the land tenure. So the communal land tenure, like the whole society gets the tenure to the land. So it's not just one person. So one person can't sell it off. And then we work in making cooperatives. For instance, they do, I think it's cacao that they do, and they gather it and they take it down to the society, to the cooperative, where they have specialized in drying the cocoa, so that they now have a process where they can do it more professionally, get better products, and then they sell it it actually gives them more if they sell it in bulk. So they can sell it to the bigger, richer cocoa companies or chocolate companies, so they can earn a little bit more. So they don't need to produce the same amount of cocoa. And this setup, where it's a cooperative with the whole society involved, has proven very popular. So we actually have people outside waiting in line to be involved in this, because they want to be part of the cooperative. And this is just by word of mouth, that this has been told that this is a good, and they can start to see that this is a security for their future. One of the things we're also doing in that same area is actually doing helping them to set up a system where they can monitor the forest. So they have the cocoa plantations, or not plantations, but it's because it's agroforestry, but they have the cocoa small bits and farms there in kind of like a buffer zone around the lush primary forest. And then they monitor the forest behind it. And we try to implement or set up systems where they can like report it if they see something directly to the government very fast. And that might be where we could feel a backlash. Because if they would meet like the intruders, I'm not sure how they handle it.
In an ideal world, what would be the perfect solution to this problem? Firstly, secondly for a consumer, so what do I go and buy?
Less meat.
Yeah, but then it's like, so a lot of people think that, okay, I buy less meat, so I buy an alternative, and an alternative is probably going to have soy in.
But that's okay.
So it's better to have
tofu
than it is to have beef.
Definitely. Because of the amount of feed or fodder that the animals are eating, it's better if you eat the peas or the beans directly. Because you wouldn't need 7 kilos to get full of 1 kilo, But the area you need to make protein for people, plant protein, is so much smaller than the area you need if you need to put it into the mouth of an animal. They need so much fodder to produce the meat, and there's always a little bit of waste of energy every time you put it through a section, a layer, something like from that to that animal to you. There's like the loss of energy. So you eating the plants directly is a lot easier on the resources of the earth. And another thing you could do is ask in your supermarket. I know it doesn't make any sense, but ask, do you know where the soy in your meat is coming from? And the salesman will be like, huh? But the more attention we create around this, the more they know that there is a demand. Because what we also hear them say is like, but the consumers doesn't want it. No, because they don't know what's freaking in their meat. They don't know the problem. They don't know the destruction they're causing. And so we really want them to know that there is a demand, that there is an ask for another product.
Yeah, maybe there's if you want to say anything in closing, and then we'll wrap it up. That's right.
Something clever?
Sure. Go and support Verdens Skove.
Where can we find your information and petitions?
Verdensskove.org, or actually the forestoftheworld.org is the English webpage. You need to go to Danish. There will be a little Danish flag up in the one corner. Mm-hmm. And then our campaigns, we are doing quite a lot of campaigns, are in the slideshow in the top, bless you. And there is one towards Danish Crown, but you can sign all the campaigns if you think they're for a good cause on biodiversity and the EU deforestation regulation, stuff like that. So go and check it out. We also work with volunteers, so maybe we can do a collaboration at some point. Would be interesting, I think. Yeah.
This talk is part of the Soy Series project at Our Food, Our Future Denmark. The Our Food, Our Future initiative is co-funded by the European Commission and is an international coalition of civil society organizations working towards changing the global food system to be sustainable and socially just. In Our Food, Our Future Denmark, we try to bring issues of food justice to the forefront of public debate. Our Food, Our Future projects are produced with the financial support of the European Union. The contents of this talk are the sole responsibility of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the European Union. Thank you for listening.